Hello, my name is Nathalie Beeck, and my presentation will be titled Born in a Burning House, Greta Thunberg and Childhood as a Community. Iconic individuals become aspirational subjects for picture book biographies, and 2019 and early 2020 saw several homages to activist Greta Thunberg hastened into print. Born in a Burning House considers Thunberg's rallying cry, "Our house is on fire," and its implied collective, "This is our home, and all children, however privileged, are born into a desperate situation that predates them by decades." I would ask how our literature and media for young audiences can defy storytelling conventions that demand and revere individual exceptionalism. I question the representation of climate change via solo environmental leaders like Thunberg when actual contemporary youth movements are replacing singular change agents with collective voices and visions. Biographical accounts of child activists align with picture book biographies of another climate hero, Nobel Peace Prize activist Wangari Maathai. Such profiles threaten to erase the activist community for a spotlight on a rising star. Maathai indubitably was the most prominent woman in the Greenbelt movement, yet her celebrity overshadows that of other women in the organization. Following the publication of her autobiography, Unbowed, in 2008, at least 5 picture books were published internationally. Scholar Sharon Smulders argues that in these books, Maathai functions, quote, as a metonym for the movement, unquote, and says that one of the picture books is a, quote, ecofeminist tale with Maathai as the folkloric wise woman to whom others look for enlightenment, unquote. Scholar Claire Echterling, our co-panelist for this ASLE conference, is less sanguine in her critique of the Maathai biographies, writing that they focus the history of the collective movement through the individual figure and endorse a form of environmentalism that privileges individual actions over collective effort and social change. This tendency to focus on the individual subject threatens to paint environmentalism as the work of extraordinary individuals and not as a consortium of necessarily insistent political and social movements. A conservative insistence on a figurehead, even when representing feminist and progressive social justice, including the youth climate movement, indicates an ongoing Western storytelling convention that is hard to shake. Where a late 20th century youth culture celebrated nonconformism, yet remained in thrall to fashionable icons too, young audiences today receive an early education in diversity, inclusion, and justice, albeit from a mix of social media and at-home polarized views. A worldwide youth community guides environmental justice activism today and is demonstrably at odds with older generations. In a July 2019 white paper called Protest for a Future, social scientists across Europe surveyed participants in Fridays for Future climate protests on the 15th of March 2019. They argued that, quote, political participation at a young age can put individuals on track to remain politically engaged throughout their lives, found that youth participants were, quote, considerably inexperienced in taking part in demonstrations, unquote, yet they invited one another and learned how to protest and rally, and they were statistically likelier to identify as young women. While the researchers did not survey children younger than 14 due to ethical constraints, they found that about 45% of the participants they surveyed were between 14 and 19 years old. Groups of people not yet old enough to vote or voting in their first elections are the grassroots activists of Youth Strikes for Climate. How then do writers and other media creators honor those stories of advocacy and explain ways to join forces with such youth-driven organizations as Fridays for Future, the Sunrise Movement, or Zero Hour? Necessary restrictions around children's rights to privacy perhaps get in the way of coalition building. Meanwhile, cries for child protection, sorely tested in the 21st century and earlier, still guide the texts written and published for our youngest readers, making it difficult for authors to tell urgent, educative stories that lack easy solutions and also to allow that contemporary children really are in harm's way. Further, conventional media, including children's books and texts like the magazines that many families still read in print subscriptions, face the challenge of representing young activists as a non-hierarchical grassroots coalition open to anyone who wants to join. Rare successes do exist, of course. The 2021 Caldecott medal-winning picture book, We Are Water Protectors, by Carol Lindstrom and Michaela Goad, represents a young activist in coalition with other First Nations water protectors. The girls' inclusive yell of "We Stand" attributes the environmental action to a team effort. Rooted in present-day conflict on contested lands, yet illustrated in an imaginative, expansive style, We Are Water Protectors recalls the efforts of water warrior Autumn Peltier, an Anishinaabe young woman born in September 2004. Peltier was 11 at the 2015 Children's Climate Conference in Sweden, and thus comparable to and on a global stage several years earlier than Greta Thunberg. Last year, at age 15, Peltier joined Thunberg at the January 2020 World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, along with other youth leaders including Natasha Mwanza of Zambia and Salvador Gomez Colon of Puerto Rico, to represent young people's perspectives amid older generations' economic and climate policies. A remark from a tribal community member of Peltier's, calling her, quote, little old woman girl, alludes to the usually positive connotation of the old soul in a young body. Nonetheless, it reminds a reader, too, of the tendency to attribute early maturity to BIPOC individuals while granting innocence to white young people. This brings us to Greta Thunberg, perhaps the most recognizable icon of the collective and global youth movement for environment. Born in 2003 and now 18 years old, Thunberg became depressed by news of climate change, and to the point where she couldn't eat and stopped going to regular in-person school. Her parents hired private tutors. In Born in a House on Fire, Scenes of a Family and a Planet in Crisis, which was originally published in Sweden as Scenes from the Heart, 2018, Greta's mother, Malena Ernman, reports on Greta's eating disorder prior to her school strike for climate. Ernman attributes Greta's refusal to eat and refusal to go to regular school to climate grief or solastalgia. Thunberg herself came to public awareness via social media in 2018 during her school strike for climate outside the Swedish Parliament building near her home. She began the school strike on August 20th and remained on strike until the Swedish general election of September 9th. As the topic of news media profiles for all ages, Thunberg represented the child body inheriting climate trauma. She was presented, and she continues to self-present and style herself wittily, as an impertinent, precocious child. And this impertinence served her well in activism, including in the face of social media hostilities. She has a long array of kind of Twitter feuds where she kind of comes out and bests her rivals internationally. Her small physical size and refusal of fashion, she usually wears a raincoat or drab sweatshirt while others wear suits, underscore a vulnerable child's status even as she ages. These two covers of Time magazine, the first in March 2019, which is a more of a fashionable pose, and the second in December 2019, where she's in her regular uniform of a sweatshirt, suggest her transformation and self-presentation. As she became known for her strikes, she reinforced a truant's flagrant rejection of required discipline. Her schoolgirl identity is reinforced in one children's biography, Valentina Camerini's Greta's story, The Schoolgirl Who Went on Strike to Save the Planet, and a mural in Stockholm tellingly pictures her as literary orphan Pippi Longstocking. Aretha Holmberg and Aida Alvinius, writing on children's agency, note that, quote, individual acts of resistance are rarely recognized as resistance. Instead, individual actions conceptualized as disobedience are described and discussed in terms of complaining behavior. When a child defies or violates socially constructed rules and conventions such as school attendance and procuring followers all over the world, the action receives major media attention. Thunberg's original power was that of disobedience and rejection of school norms. Hers is not the docile body in the school desk, although her sitting in solitude outside the parliament in inclement weather requires its own kind of discipline. Children like her come to associate the strict protest, the school strike, with an interruption to the norm as well as a firm commitment to going against prescription and authority for an important cause. Working adults began calling for a general strike to echo the school strike. And this is not quite the message of the ordinary disciplinary picture book or chapter book. Camerini's Greta's story blurs the school strike with a Fridays for Future rally, saying that the site of the school strike, quote, had to move to the city's historic center. It wasn't too far from the parliament, so it was okay. Greta wanted to protest, not break the law. That passive voice that the protest had to move, but no authority was named, plus the reinforcement that Greta did not want to break the law, delivers a warning against direct action, even as it celebrates Thunberg's stand. And in reality, this was the assigned meeting place for Fridays where Fridays for Future chose to rally, but not the original site of Thunberg's first brief school strike. The lack of precision here signals gatekeepers' discomfort with children who defy authority. Banksy-style street art on Thunberg and also sanctioned murals, as well as the illegal stenciling, confirms the association of the school strike with forms of direct action committed by an artist as a form of public expression. These art forms are anti-consumerist and difficult to monetize, although so many have tried. Further, in line with her anti-capitalist goals, Thunberg rejected the Nordic Council's 2019 Environmental Award. This rejection of an honor and a cash prize proves she won't sell out, while reminding cynics that her family has the immense financial and social privilege to turn down that kind of recognition, plus the equivalent of $52,000 US. Although she is often depicted as sitting or acting alone, too, Thunberg's protest quickly drew fellow participants, and she spoke to a gathering of about 2,000 people at the Swedish Climate March on Saturday, September 8, 2018. Ernman notes, the host introduces Greta, and she walks slowly but steadily into the middle of the amphitheater's gravel stage. She is accompanied by 3 of the girls who have gone on strike with her for the past 2 weeks, Edith, Mina, and Morrigan. Non-iconic fellow travelers complicate the solo celebrity narrative. Evidence shows that these other kids did share the stage. After this, Thunberg continued the strike once a week as Fridays for Future. With her yellow raincoat, trademark braids, diminutive size, and fierce determination, she took on leadership status, and this becomes the subject of biographies even though the climate strike galvanized other people her age. Ernman, in a book for adult readers, complicates the sources of Thunberg's activism because we learn so much about Thunberg before her celebrity, and we learn about Ernman's own privileged status as an opera star. Certainly, Greta Thunberg's childhood activism was and is by no means pure or spontaneous or alone, given her community's advocacy and encouragement. Even if she sat by herself at first, she had a coalition of like-minded people around her. Before she publicly and sensationally rejected jet travel, famously crossing the Atlantic for the UN Climate Action Summit in a zero-carbon yacht, her father already had committed to an electric car, given up air travel, and stopped eating meat, and her mother was rejecting performances unless they were carbon neutral. These details do prove too nuanced or perhaps too threatening for mainstream publishing to include in books for young readers. So I would ask, are young readers and activists meant to join Thunberg on the front lines, be more like her in other ways, or see her as a distant inspiration? One exhortation, Valentina Gianelli's We Are All Greta, Be Inspired to Save the World, imagines that Thunberg and youth of today have passions in common. Jeanette Winter, in a picture book titled Our House is on Fire, Greta Thunberg's Call to Save the Planet, pictures Thunberg enormous at the forefront of a rally as other children raise protest signs, but then pictures the children without Thunberg in front of them. Even at a climate march in Australia, participants carry photographic masks of Thunberg as if in a collective self-recognition. We are encouraged to identify with her, even if her embodiment of solastalgia is a burden for one so young, and even if her brand of white Scandinavian environmental advocacy is not a comfortable fit for everyone. At the beginning of this talk, I asked whether 21st century texts for young environmentalists reinforce conventions of individual exceptionalism. Books and media could acknowledge age-based identity and collaboration across communities, or fall back on cliches about innocence and safety, regardless of the dangers posed by climate change. Collective and grassroots environmental activism is reshaping the image and the power of the child participant as a model for change. I remain curious as to how to disrupt conventions of image making and storytelling. Thank you.